And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my co-host and counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Excited for this national championship later on today. And, of course, excited to talk a little bit about these quarterback battles.
Yeah, we do have some quarterback battles. We'll go over to Ohio State and we'll go down to Notre Dame. But, Joe, why do I feel like that this is cannon fodder? As my grandfather would say in reference to these QB battles. Why do I feel like that I'm just getting duped? Like, I feel like I know who the starting quarterbacks are going to be. Am I crazy and think like I'm going to digress to you about the Notre Dame QB situation, but Ohio State feels like it's Julian saying or bust to me, right?
I guess I would assume that it would be Julian saying, but at the same time, do we know with absolute certainty? I mean, I've talked to some people that watched saying during their last spring game that I trust their opinions on quarterbacks, and they weren't completely blown away. A lot could have changed since the last spring game, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that it's saying, nor do I think it's a foregone conclusion that it is Steven Jelly who is going to start for Notre Dame.
I feel like I'm being duped. I feel like I'm being duped. Maybe I'm not. And look, so we'll talk about that, but we'll talk about the actual situation that's going on with both quarterback situations at Ohio State and Notre Dame. Also, we'll do a Penn State deep dive. Joe, what some people believe that Penn State will be the number one overall team coming into the season in preseason rankings.
I don't know if they're more talented than Texas, but they certainly have a much easier path. And that is going to be the big talking point that we have is the schedule, like we did with Texas yesterday, is that Texas has a couple of difficult matchups, but is a favorable one per SEC standards. Penn State has a favorable schedule no matter what conference they're in. They get a lot of easy matchups. They get a lot of opportunities to host teams with only one real difficult game traveling to Ohio State, which we'll dig into a little bit more later.
So we'll also do that as well. Joe, it seems to me that a lot of people are going to have them at one, but the people that won't will just say, James Franklin can't win the big one, so we're not going to put him there. That's how I do. That's how I feel like there's not a lot of deep dives going on with Penn State. It's all about James Franklin. It's not about what they got coming back, or it's not that they have 4 offensive linemen coming back who, by the way, at moments and times dominated in the running game. Like we don't talk about that enough, but we'll certainly get into that. Now, you did tell me you didn't want to talk about this house case, but just to start off the show, I got to bring this up.
Okay.
This shit's getting wild, man. That's all I'm going to say. This shit with the house case is getting absolutely insane.
Well, so you texted me earlier today and asked if it's worth us bringing up. And my response to you was, and this goes in line with what you just said, my response to you was, let's wait until the dust settles and then we will react to what happens, because anything that we talk about right now at the current moment could be dated in an instant. It could change as quickly as possible.
When I texted you. It changed when I texted you. Right.
I'm not even, I got to be completely honest with you. I'm not even paying attention to it until it's done, because this is a battle that is being waged at the current moment in a closed doors in a boardroom or wherever they're doing this. There is so much that could go on over the next week or few days until this thing is like actually solidified.
Here's what I'm gathering from it. And the only thing that I'll say, it would seem as if the judge that is on the case at the current moment, Claudia Wilkin, is trying to separate both of these or all of these cases into individualized cases. Here's my initial thought at this exact moment. Joe, she might be on to something. And let me tell you why. Why are we asking her to regulate college athletics when all sports are created differently? You know, they went to Livy Dunn today and they asked her about TV revenue share. And she's like, I don't think that I'm getting my value or what I'm worth. And she claps back and says, sweetheart, you're in a sport. I mean, she didn't say this, but what she basically said in a nice way was, sweetheart, you're in a sport that does not generate profit. Like football.
It also doesn't get broadcasted. Like how many people actually
it gets broadcasted. I mean, it's on ESPN, but at the same time.
ESPNU?
It's a non-generating sport, revenue-generating sport. Joe, there's only two in most instances. That being men's basketball and football. That means that football pays 98% of the bills. 98%. And if we're talking, all I am saying, that's why separating it could be, and she brought up your logic of a collective bargaining agreement, but she goes, y'all didn't even bring the number one thing that you needed here, and that being a bargaining agreement. All I would say is this. You're trying to be fair with college athletics when it's not fair. I mean, if you're a football player and you're like, why is the money that I'm making going to a sport that makes no money? That's the part where everybody's getting caught up in.
That's where I think the general confusion is. And I think that a lot of these former football players and current football players, anyone who's fighting for the side of football players, yeah, they should feel pretty disenfranchised by having to split the bill and having to share money with other sports, right? It's not correlated to Title IX, because Title IX is about an even distribution of resources for both men's and women's athletics, for all of those sports, for men's and women's sports. It's about making sure that they have the same amount of money going to both sides. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about money generated and revenue being shared on broadcasting deals, on what is generated off of marketing. All of these things, the revenue that is generated now has to be split with these institutions and their players. The NBA does not have an even split down the middle. They have an involvement with the WNBA, but they don't have a split down the middle that half the salary has to go to the WNBA. Nobody watches the WNBA for the most part. It is a fraction of the viewership of what the NBA gets. The amount of money that goes to it is based on the results that it's driven. It's just like in a workplace. If you have a female employee who does a much better job than you do and is much better at her job, she's going to earn more money than you and she's going to get promoted. That's not, it's just I think that's where the misidentification and confusion with this. And I think right now it sounds like they're understanding that this is not Title IX.
They're trying to make something political that isn't political.
Well, I almost don't even think they're trying to make it political. I think they're just trying to be like, oh, yeah, we got to split this up without even digging into it.
Not if you went in there today and look, I love Livy Dunn. Well, no, I love Livy Dunn, but she went in there and I'm not getting my value. And I'm like, she goes, everything I make in NIL. And I'm like, listen, well,
that's the value that she's creating. She makes money off of her social profile and her marketing deals. She's on
the cover
commercials.
Of
she's on commercials that she's getting paid for. Is she supposed to split that money with the LSU football players?
That's exactly what I brought up literally in the show that I just did.
She makes more than most of the guys on the football team. That's the craziest part about all this. It's like,
Joe, she made more money literally than the entire collective gives out for LSU football.
Yeah.
How much do you think she got? How much do you think her and Paul got paid for GQ? I mean, I'll tell you the number if you want it, but how much do you think?
Probably $2 million, $200,000.
Oh no, you're right. The first go around. That's the part that I'm just bringing up here. So again, listen, they're going to have to pay over around $3 billion to football players. Sorry. Sorry. I mean, you lost. So look, when it finally hits, we'll go through the actual understanding of it. But
that is going to be a long episode, by the way. When that is finalized, that's all we're doing for the entire episode.
We might have to break it up into 3. I mean, based off of what Claudia Wilkin just broke down.
Yeah.
You might have, and look, I warned my local audience because I covered just an individualized team. I was like, brother, y'all understand that some of these things that you like, but look, football, baseball, and basketball are safe because they're generating sports.
There's going to be a lot of sports, particularly the Olympic ones. This is when I was working as the producer for the College Football Inquirer. I implore anybody to go back and listen to some of their shows on the house case. Ross Dellinger does a great job of reporting on all this. And one of the things that they brought up, him and Pat, both brought up is that these Olympic sports that not only don't make money, but also lose shit tons of money for these schools, that back at one point it was valuable for Stanford to be able to say, hey, we've got a great swimming program. We've got a great fencing program. But now that you have to find a way to give them money, and also give money to other sports, they're going to get turned into club sports. That's what's going to happen here.
Can I be frank with you? Look, LSU has won multiple national titles. You bring up Notre Dame for lacrosse. Let's not act like that we don't love that and that we're not going to support and watch that, okay? However, when it comes to fairness and inclusion, I'm not going to cut money from a guy that's going out there and playing football and it's making your money to cover your shit. That's like me, Joe, that's literally like me and you right now, okay? If I had, which it's kind of different in some ways, but if I had to give you like AYS stuff and you had to give me Hack City or the draft show stuff, why would we do that? Like it doesn't work in common day life. It shouldn't work in sports, but it's the only place that seems like people think that it should. Anyway.
I think that the final part with this, though, if we do see sports end up getting pulled back, basically what's going to, I think, happen, the schools that have wealthy donors and I think a lot of academic schools fit in this conversation. The sports that you just mentioned, lacrosse, maybe cross country, like whatever it is, if they have a former athlete that works in like private equity or something like that, that is going to be where their budgets come from.
Nike.
Well, yeah, like there's going to be a very small number of schools that produce quality athletes, and the rest of it's basically going to be club sports.
Well, let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
This is the question that I bring up. You said it has nothing. Does that not infringe on Title IX, though? Like, that will be the question that we would have to bring up. Like, because you do.
That's why if you make it a club sport, you don't have to adhere to Title IX, though.
Well,
the resources that you put into it would be so finite. Just be like,
But you have to have the same amount of scholarships for women's athletics than you do men's athletics. The Title IX is basically that you have to have the same. You see what I'm saying here? Like,
so basically, what would happen in this situation if they're so financially crunched? If you had to bump your lacrosse team to club, you'd have to then also bump a women's sport, or vice versa. If you had to bump a women's lacrosse program to club, you'd have to do that with a men's lacrosse program out of need.
Well, this is my point. I do. I hear what you're saying. I think more men's sports will be cut because of the fact that you adhere to in Title IX. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I mean, boy. What a shit show we have on our hands. By the way, last thing, I swear to God, we got to get moving. She literally started off by saying, why are you not here giving me a collective bargaining agreement?
That's a great point.
God, this is so screwed. All right. So, everybody do us a favor. We're going to get to this. We're going to actually get to football here. But everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share all those groups if you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. I got to play it. All right. Let's get rolling here. So, Joe, we do have some quarterback battles that are underway in college spring football. Let's start off with Ohio State here, because I'm going to digress to you for the Notre Dame stuff. But Ryan Day came out today and said that Julian Sayin and Lincoln, I cannot say the last name. Do it.
Kienholz.
I keep saying Kienholz.
I think it's Kienholz.
I know. It's my fault. But Lincoln Kienholz, see, I did it, and you even told me the name. Regardless, both of them are quote-unquote neck on neck. He did say that Tavian Sinclair has the longest to go at the current moment, but his speed is unreal. When you hear Ryan Day talk about the quarterback battle that has gone on this spring, what are your initial thoughts about what you hear, what you think, what you see?
This is one of those things where I'd really like to see how the spring game looks. And this is going to be one of those spring games that I pay super close attention to because I want to see if there is a separation that's not being described. I think back to last year, and we recorded a video on this about how Devin Brown was being described as looking fantastic in practice, and there was not much separation between Will Howard and Devin Brown. That was not like the direct descriptor, but like all we kept hearing was about how Devin Brown was closing the gap. And we all knew that that wasn't true. We entertained the thought, but we knew that Will Howard was going to start. We knew that Will Howard was the better option. and the rest is history. They won a national championship with him. I'm feeling like that's what this situation is. I think that Ryan Day, who talked about Tavian Sinclair, who's super dynamic and he has a very high upside, knows that if in a circumstance where Julian Sayin goes down with an injury, he can't really rely on Sinclair as a true freshman who has been described as extremely raw, but very talented. He needs to do whatever he can to keep Lincoln Kienholz. Thank you for Hummus Hero for pointing that out in the chat. By the way, also thanks to him for pointing out everybody to hit that like button. Kienholz, he needs him to keep him around to have a really good backup quarterback. In case anything happens with Julian Sayin, if you do not have a good backup quarterback, you will be screwed. There are not a lot of options that you can go and get right now unless you find a sitting backup on another team that's willing to take money to also sit and be a backup, or you dipped into the FCS ranks and took a starter and gave him a shit ton of money to sit on the bench. Like, I feel like that this specifically is a circumstance where Ryan Day is trying to prevent a departure, knowing how frequently this happens and how long Kienholz has been there, that he would likely like to go get an opportunity to start somewhere.
So I agree with what you're saying in reference to this situation. So Kienholz, Lincoln Kienholz, and Julian Sayin. Joe, I don't think that here's my opinion. So last year you went into a season, if you're Ryan Day, and you did have Brown, you did have Kyle McCord still technically, but you moved on from him because you knew that you could go somewhere else and get a quarterback. They went and got Walker Howard. Julian Sayin has been there for a year, and Aaron Nolan left. Why didn't Aaron Nolan leave? Because he probably was told what? That he's probably not going to start or play there, and something happened. Why would he leave if he was not going to get the chance to be the starting quarterback at the school that he initially went to? This screams to me Julian Sayin. It screams to me exactly what you're saying in reference to that you think that St. Clair is not up to where, God forbid something happened to Julian Sayin, that you need somebody that you think that can be serviceable if, God forbid, a situation happens that he went down. The actions are always going to speak louder than words ever will. The Aaron Nolan transfer for me solidifies who won that battle. And then, Joe, why would they go out into the portal last year and get a quarterback only not to do it this one? There's one thing about Ryan Day. He's going to get good quarterback play. I don't care what Kyle McCord. Like, Kyle McCord was fine. If that's your floor, then God bless Captain America. If that's the floor, then good on it. The reason Aaron Nolan leaves, the reason that they don't go in the portal and get somebody else is because they have faith in this kid. I'm just not buying at all that Kienholz is, for what it's worth, even in the running. Now, I do think they'll split reps. I think that they'll do whatever they got to do. I think this is Julian Sayin's to lose, and it's not to say that they can't, but here's the thing that I will throw out there. At the end of the press conference, Ryan Day said this. Look, you guys were out there. He was talking to me. Look, you guys were out there Saturday. What do you think? It's not like I don't think
that answer.
It's
a good answer because it's just like you guys figure it out.
Exactly. Well, but he finished it up by saying this. I do expect someone to take a massive leap this week, and that guy taking first team reps.
I think the most important part of it.
Come on.
Right. He's got somebody in mind. I really do think, though, even if he does go on to announce a starter at the end of the spring, I don't think that's a good idea for the exact reason that we just talked about here. Yes, it will put confidence in Julian Sayin, and that Julian Sayin will feel really great going into the summer, but you can't risk losing Lincoln Kienholz. You just can't risk losing him. It is the same circumstance with Devin Brown. Devin Brown was there for multiple years. There was always talks about how great of an athlete he was and some of the potential that he had. If he had transferred and gone somewhere else, probably could have started. But having a guy that is dynamic and is experienced and been around the program is extremely valuable for your backup quarterback. In the history of the sport before the transfer portal, having guys that were around for a very long time was always important for some of the biggest programs going on national championship runs in case their starter went down. So losing Kienholz, again, they can't allow for him to think that he's losing this quarterback battle. I would keep the reps as even as possible up until the end of, that last 3 weeks of camp. Like after the first week and a half of camp, if you really feel that confident saying, then turn it over. But I wouldn't do it before the summer. And I don't think that Ryan Day will, knowing his track record.
Yeah, knowing his track record, he won't. He'll throw both of them out there with the first unit.
Wait. So I'm going to cut you off. Well, look even further back, the Devin Brown, Kyle McCord instance. Forgotten about that.
Devin Brown. If you remember in the spring game, Devin Brown started with the ones. It was not Kyle McCord.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I agree with that. But here's the thing. Here's the caveat that I threw at you then, and I'll throw at you now. Here's the opposite risk of that. Every rep that Devin Brown took, Kyle McCord didn't get. So,
good point.
I listen. What are you in the business of? Are you in the business of developing players, or are you in the business of making sure that you just don't lose games? You cannot go into a season scared that Julian Sain's gonna get hurt. You can't do that. And if he does, well, St. Clair's there, and well, you got a hell of a coaching job that you got to do. Listen, when you have a young quarterback, and it's of my opinion that every rep counts, spring or not. Spring or not. Now, Hummus Hero in the chat says, I don't think Ryan ever named a starter before fall camp, even with Justin Fields, who was completely obvious. I'm with Hummus on that. I'm with you on that. I don't think he's going to do it. But there is a caveat when you're splitting first-team reps. Julian Sain's still not getting those reps. And listen, the last thing I'd say here, offensively, you got absolute weapons at receiver, absolute dogs. The guy that can throw the ball the best, regardless of what we think, is Julian Sain. He gives you the best upside to win these games. That's where I'm going to lean here.
I agree with you on that part. Both guys have tools to work with. Julian Sain has been described as the more natural player among the two, and I think that he's going to have the higher impact. We've only heard really positive reviews on Julian Sain. That's what all the whispers always are. I feel like I haven't really heard anything about Lincoln Kienholz, and that's not a shot at him, but you would think that if there was a more realistic competition here, and if Kienholz had an actual capability to start, there would be some like, oh man, he's killing it at practice right now. I feel like that doesn't show up in those reports.
It doesn't. Speaking of quarterback battles, you're not ready for this one, but I can lead it if we need to. Breaking per Mike McAllister out of Syracuse, New York. Fran Brown said, screw what Ryan Day thinks. I'm naming Ricky Collins as the next as my next starting quarterback for the Syracuse Orange. Joe, listen, Ricky Collins is somebody that I followed a long time. When he was at LSU, I did not think he was ready. I also didn't think Kyle McCord was ready either. And then they completely went out there and did some amazing things. It is going to be absolutely insane to see what Ricky Collins, who transferred from LSU, is going to do. Here's what I will say. The dual threat option that Ricky Collins presents you is absolutely dangerous. Listen to me now. He by himself in the ACC is one of the more dangerous athletes that anybody will face. I promise you. I've seen him do it in practice versus SEC opponents. I've seen it literally with this. My dude was running scout team making throws that were elite, but he also made some bad ones. But Fran Brown just named his starting quarterback and says, I don't care what anybody thinks. Ricky Collins is my starting quarterback.
I find this really funny that like midway through spring, I feel like this almost never happens where a kid's just like, boom, he's the starter. He's going to start next year. He must have blown him away, or there must be awful options on the table and there's nothing good for them to turn to. Based on what you've described to me in the past, I don't know if he's as proficient as a passer as Kyle McCord, but I will say it's very promising knowing that McCord was as inconsistent as he was 2 years ago with Ohio State, and then took this huge step forward and put up all the yards and touchdowns that he ended up putting up.
He's got a long delivery. Now, look, I grew up in a family of baseball dudes that taught throwing for a living. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you throw, you got to be here. You can't, you got to be quick. He goes down, back up, and then throws.
Does he have long arms? A lot of long arm guys do that where they elongate the load up.
I don't know if he's got long arms. I mean, I think he's got average arms, but okay. I feel like he would, because he started as a freshman in high school, one of the biggest high schools in the state. So he didn't have the arm strength as a freshman. I think fundamentally he never got out of the long delivery. The best shortstop in high school, I would have said from a baseball perspective, but he's here. The question is, can he, if he's a normal set, dude's got a bazooka now. Dude's got an arm now.
I will say before we round this quick update out, I constantly have respect for Fran Brown for his approach to roster building. I appreciate that he has done this back-to-back quarterbacks, going and getting guys that were in bad situations at premier top programs. So he was at LSU, wasn't going to crack the starting lineup, gets him in the portal. He got Kyle McCord after the downfall at Ohio State, and it was a huge get for them. I think that this is just another one of those possible plays that pans out, that he's great at evaluating talent and knowing how to tap into it.
Be interesting. There's one more quarterback battle before we get to Penn State here. Let's go to South Bend, Indiana. As now Marcus Freeman, Joe, how about this? Going into a season without a transfer quarterback, now that they've been able to solidify that position through high school recruiting, Scott Angeli, CJ Carr, some of the names for Notre Dame.
Steve Angeli, by the way.
What did I say, Scott?
Yeah.
I know a Scott Angeli. Okay, Steve Angeli, sorry. But Angeli, Carr, both of those names that we need to talk about. I graduated with a Scott Angeli. Anyway, I'm going to divert to you on this. What's going on at Notre Dame when it comes to the quarterback position?
Admittedly, I wish I had more of a pulse on what was happening with this, but I don't. I find it's not concerning, but I find it interesting that there's no separation. And I brought this up as soon as the season ended and we talked about turning the page for Notre Dame in 2025 going into next year, that there were three names that were in the competition. It wasn't just CJ Carr and Steve Angeli. Kenny Minchie is also in the picture. And the annoying non-answer that Marcus Freeman gave, I'm not saying he's annoying, but like I always hate when there's a quarterback back. Right, the coach speak where he just very clearly said that there's no separation. I hate that because I'm hoping that at the very least we would know who's 1 and 2. I would like by the end of the spring, Blake, if there's 3 guys competing along the same line of what you brought up earlier, that needs to be dwindled down to 2. We need to move down to 2. There are too many reps that are going and being split among 3 guys. That is too confusing. There needs to be some sort of separation. Now, the one thing that seems to be partially the case, which I don't totally love, is I think Steve Angeli does end up being the likely starter because he has been there for longer. He's more experienced. Some people think that he could do some great things based on that little drive that he put together against Penn State. I think that he is.
It wasn't a little drive. Hold on now. It was
a big drive, but it was a few plays. It's not like we've got like a big sample size. His ceiling is the lowest out of all of the quarterbacks, but his floor is the highest. And it all comes down to if Denbrock and Marcus Freeman value steadiness over a higher outcome in this circumstance.
Let me ask you a question. Who do you think has – I mean, I know that Marcus Freeman has the final say. Don't get what I'm saying twisted. Do you think – that if Mike Denbrock says whatever quarterback that he wants to roll with, Marcus Freeman says okay?
I would hope so. I've found kind of odd a lot of times Marcus Freeman, when he comments on the offense, it sounds like he does have some sort of direction and then just the overall mentality. I would hope that now that Denbrock has been there for a year, I kind of respect Freeman for Denbrock's first year, maybe having a little bit more involvement in say, but now that Denbrock's been there for a year and he's worked with all three guys, I would hope that he allows Denbrock to make this decision. Like, what was it like for Denbrock when he was under Kelly? Was it his decision to go with Jaden Daniels and all
different.
that?
It's different. Okay, let's go there. Mike Denbrock did not give two Rudy Poos what any other quarterback did besides Jaden Daniels. I will confirm that. I know that for a fact.
All right.
But Kelly made Denbrock roll with everybody in that first year to make sure that he was for sure. Right? Jaden Daniels is a different beast, right? Like I think it's a different, like, especially from what Mike Denbrock, like, look at Riley Leonard. I mean, Jaden literally from a running standpoint was on steroids of what they did in 22. What I would tell you is, from my personal connection with the Denbrock Association, I do think that Mike wants somebody that can be a little bit more mobile, but if you give him a guy that can throw the football, he will lean there. He will lean there. What they did in the offseason with Jaden before he won the Heisman, Joe, I'm just going to be honest, they watched more film together than I've heard of any real coordinator and player doing it. They talked about it. So we'll see. I don't know what Mike's ultimate decision would be, but I do think, for what it's worth, I've never seen CJ Carr ever, so I don't know what the kid
I have no idea what to expect from him because he's coming off of an elbow injury, and I think that is the clearest indication that he's not in the mix as much as I think people want to believe.
That's what I was about to bring up. I don't think that here's what I ultimately believe. I ultimately believe if it's close, just from the outside looking in, why wouldn't you give Scott Angeli? I graduated with Steve Angeli. Sorry. Steve Angeli, why would you not get him the first correct? Because, Joe, quite honestly, he's got 80 passing attempts and he's over 72%. Now, I know that's not a massive sample size, but by the small stats that we have, it looks as if that he's a pretty damn good decision maker.
That's why I kind of think that he ends up starting, is that when you have a battle like this with three guys, with one of the highest recruited quarterbacks that you've had in the last 5 to 10 years, you have an underrated high upside guy in Kenny Minchie, and you have a player who's been a backup for a long period of time and who has stepped in before. With all of those variables, you're going to go with the guy who's the better decision maker in practice. You're going to go with the guy. And a lot of times, here's like right. And here's a layer about this that you don't even think about with these quarterback battles. Said player, and Angeli is the one in this circumstance, is around all of the defensive players and has gone up against all of the defensive players for multiple years now, knows all their tendencies, knows subconsciously how to handle certain situations in practice going up against this defense that he's been facing for multiple years now. So he has this advantage of being surrounded by and competing with the Notre Dame defense as the backup and all of that stuff. That is going to make him look better in practice. That does not mean that he is the better quarterback, but when the battle is being had out, and this is why we were talking about the importance of the Fran Brown, Colorado, Deion Sanders spring game happening, is that would actually create an opportunity to prove who the better players are at certain positions instead of just only seeing the guys that you're used to being around. So with all that in mind, if it's close, it goes to Angeli.
Steve, I love you. Can I throw this out there to you? Steve, there was a comment last week about Steve Angeli from somebody that we respect.
Greg McElroy.
Okay. Well, Greg didn't say anything that was crazy. He just said, what if he takes a massive leap? It was the way that it was reported by some at Notre Dame that I'm not throwing shade. That was like, come on, bro. That's not what he said. But
the problem was, and I texted this to you, the dumbass producer who is in charge of cutting clips for that show didn't listen to the clip, and the way that he cut it made it incredibly clickbaity. He didn't listen to anything that he said, and is exactly what you just pointed out. His statement about saying that Steve Angeli could take a massive leap like Joe Burrow did when nobody knew what he was going to be going into that following season. That wasn't what he was not saying this is the next Joe Burrow. And that dipshit at ESPN who cut that clip is a moron for doing that to Greg. I'd be pissed if I was a host and somebody did that to me.
All I'm going to say, people say that Joe Burrow came out of nowhere. In the last 3 games, he had 15 total touchdowns of the first season that he started. Mm-hmm. That just confirms to me that you didn't watch a single thing that happened at LSU those last 3 games. Joe, he averaged 5 touchdowns and 350 yards. The truth of it is that the Burrow leap came post-Bama. So after they got beat by Bama, Joe Burrow went on an absolute tear. He didn't lose another game. Oh, well, he lost to A&M. But they damn near didn't in 7 overtimes. So he went 18-1 in the last 19 games of his career. It's not like he came out of nowhere. What was it, UCF? When he got hit, he got blasted. He's 350, 3 touchdowns, whatever, or 4 touchdowns with the rushing. Again, dude, like, what are we talking about? That's the part for me that I'm like, maybe it was 12. Regardless of the amount, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say maybe this now makes the comparison work more. Not saying that he's comparing him to Burrow, but like we had exposure to Joe Burrow finishing that season really well, and he had a really strong finish. And Jelly doesn't have full starts, but he had a couple little instances where he got to play, and he looked really good in those situations.
Well, that's where I wanted to go. So hold on. Those are games. This is a drive. So, like, for example,
yes,
if we're going based off of guys that came in and premiered during drives, then Austin Simmons is one of the top quarterbacks in the country.
That's a good point.
Right?
Good point.
I mean, like,
good point. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're going to go there, and if that's the way that we judge based off of things, then Austin Simmons should be a top 5 quarterback in the country based off of the offense that he's at and where he's at. So spare me on the drive thing. The kid showed that he can throw the ball. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be a starter, can't be a starter, and doesn't have talent. We talked about that during the Penn State thing. Like, hey, he sparked you, if we're just being honest. But good googly moogly, man. I mean, like, come on.
Yeah, we know it's April when we've got clips like that going viral. We gotta settle down.
Well, can I tell you this? Don't be mad at me. I am tired of everything getting compared to that 2019 team. Because I get tagged.
Hold on. Don't get tired. It's one of the greatest teams of all time until somebody surpasses it. How this works.
Hold on now. We brought up 2023 Colorado, and they said what team would win. You remember the post by ESPN.
Okay, well, that was stupid shit. Okay. That was dumb. That was really, really dumb. And that I agree with.
Then they did it for Miami this past year. And I'm like, bro, what?
Wait, did they?
Yes. Oh, God.
Oh, man, yes. I don't remember that.
They did it for Miami. Oh, who would win? And I'm like, dog. One team's almost getting upset by Virginia Tech. Like, come on, dude.
Hey, man, they were close. They were only three losses away from being close.
Jesus Christ. Stop. I hate it. All right. Let's get to this. Joe, we started this last night with the University of Texas, but we go to Happy Valley. We go to Pennsylvania. We talk about Penn State. We're doing our deep dives for teams. Joe, I mentioned this in the beginning of the show. I'm going to bring this back up here. I do think that now that we're the heart of the offseason, that Penn State, for a lot of people, is going to be the number 1 team come preseason polling and the preseason overall. But we got a lot to talk about with Penn State. I leave it open to you. When you see this Penn State team going into 2025, are they the version for you that might be the number 1 team in the country coming in preseason, or are there things that you need to see and things that we need to discuss?
Personally, I still think that Texas has the better roster. I think that they have the more talented contingency of former 5-star recruits that are going to go on to have serious impacts in 2025. But yes. I think that, as I said in the open, that I believe that Penn State is built for a path and momentum that can be built throughout the season that leads them to getting to the national championship. We could spend time talking about James Franklin and his inability to win in big games. Let's get to that later. I did this yesterday with Texas, and I want to do this again with Penn State. Their departures are far less significant than Texas. They are not losing as many players, but they're losing 2 players of utmost importance. They're losing Abdul Carter, who was the best defensive end in college football last year, who had insane production, and they're losing Tyler Warren, who was the best tight end in the country last year, who had insane production.
Well, and Jalen Reed, who's their leading tackler.
And they're also losing Jalen Reed. And they didn't have Kevin Winston Jr. because he was hurt the entire year. And they also lose Kobe King, who was one of their starting inside linebackers. Outside of that, though, most of their core is coming back. It is very similar to Ohio State last year when they lost some guys, but most of the important players came back. Michigan the previous year before that, where they lost some guys. They lost Aiden Hutchinson, but most of the important guys come back. This gifted group, Drew Allar, Nick Singleton, Kaytron Allen, the front offensive line that they have that's returning a lot of experience, bringing back Denai Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant on that defensive line. That group, to me, I think is one of the best on offense and defense in terms of experience and talent in college football, why they firmly sit at number 2, and I don't see another team challenging them for that number 2 team going into this season.
All right. Well, you forgot the biggest addition I would put on there with Jim Knowles, but
yes,
let me just throw this out there. Defensively, you are losing Abdul Carter, Devon Thomas, Kobe King, and Jalen Reed. That's a lot of production. But the thing, like you mentioned, Durant's back, Dennis Sutton is back, Zakee Wheatley, who was on my top 5 defenders in the Big Ten. It's not like that you don't have dudes. And in reference to defense, here's what I'd say for Penn State. Your defensive coordinator leaves. You have a new one that comes in Tom Allen, and he leaves. You had back-to-back top 3 defenses. 1 year under Manny Diaz, thank you. You were the number 1 defense in the country in total defense. Then you fell to 3. Well, guess what? You play more games than you did the year before. It's going to happen when you face good teams. Joe, I need to see them be bad defensively because it seems as if, and we get on James Franklin a lot, they have scouted very well. They have developed very well because it's when you lose the amount of talent that they have in the last 2 years, and then you continue to run out what you've been running out, brother, I just got to be real with you. It seems as if that they're scouting and developing at a very high level. When's the last time that you heard a big-name player defensively leave Penn State?
That's a great point. They don't typically lose key starters or backups.
Because they're developing from within. There's a lot that we get on the James Franklin about, but we don't take the fundamentals of why they constantly are having success. That is why defensively with Kobe King, with Abdul Carter, with Jalen Reed leaving, that I don't have a lot of worries. Now, your leading tackler is gone, but I have a lot of faith in Zakee Wheatley. I also get back Dom DeLuca. So it's not like that you don't have this experience at linebacker either. So, right. Joe, you still have a lot of experience in all 3 levels defensively. What can Jim Knowles do now being the highest paid coordinator in the country? Look, it could take him time, and it's okay if it does. I don't know if it will, but here's the thing for me with Penn State. You got 4 offensive linemen returning, and that run game was damn near elite last year. Joe, they averaged 200 rushing yards per game against everybody. Against everybody. I mean, against Ohio State, they couldn't run the ball. Completely different style of what they were doing. They got out of their what they do as a team, and it bit them in the ass. Tyler Warren was the leading rusher in that game. You have Allen, you have Singleton that are coming back. The question for me with post-Tyler Warren, which the biggest loss for me is Tyler Warren, because that was your number 1 receiving threat. And, Joe, what got them beat at the end of the year last year? Let's call it what it is.
Not having receivers.
Not having receivers. They could not separate. Other than Tyler Warren and Nick Singleton, no one can separate. But, Joe, I can make the argument that Notre Dame made arguably the biggest offseason move that no one has talked about all offseason. Devontae Ross out of Troy, the wide receiver last year, had 76 catches, 1,043 yards, and 11 touchdowns. What if they did find somebody? This kid's got a lot of production at Troy. And look, he was one of the more top recruited guys when he went into the portal. Joe, I found this out today when I was looking at this. Did you know that he had 8 SEC and 8 Big Ten offers? So it's not
He's very underrated. He's a very underrated guy.
So even if I think this kid can play, well, they're outside of Penn State. There were 15 other teams trying to recruit this kid to their team. That's how dynamic that they think that he can be. They also bring in Kaytron Hudson. The outright truth is that when they got in big games and big situations, I did not feel like that they could throw the ball and make the throw that they needed to make to win the game. I think that Penn State, for what it's worth, is a big throw away from being a national title contending team a year ago. What happened at Ohio State? Look, you lost at the 1-yard line to the national champion. You're in a dogfight with the runner-up. You're right there. The question will be, Joe, can they finally get over that hump? What they do on the outside will be key here. No one's going to believe them until they do it. Did they hit big with Devontae Ross? Those will be the questions that we will be deciding here at the end.
Right. I have no concerns about defensively because we know that Jim Knowles is he's the best defensive coordinator in college football at the current moment. He is going to command this group that was well recruited for multiple years, and they are going to produce results. They are going to still be dominant. Just because they lost Abdul Carter does not mean that they still don't have a strong core of players, especially Denai Dennis Sutton, who's going to take another step forward, I think, this year. Losing Tyler Warren, I've listened to some shows, some recruiting shows, and they've talked about how Luke Reynolds,
who had some big catches in the playoffs now.
Yeah, he had some big plays. He only had 111 yards, but Luke Reynolds could end up being that next great Penn State tight end. I don't know if he replaces the Tyler Warren production, but you at least have a dynamic athlete at tight end. Ross and Kaytron Hudson are, or at least should be, improvements at receiver. It stinks that they ended up losing Harrison Wallace to Ole Miss, who was one of their only decent receivers. But my biggest question mark goes, I think, a little bit further than how does the receiver room do? I know that the run game is going to be great.
Here comes
what does Drew Allar do in terms of an improvement? Does Drew Allar take the step forward in making better decisions in game-changing situations? Most importantly, does Andy Kotelnicki get out of his own way when he's got to call plays and simplify things and not getting cute when they need to just run somebody over and pick up yards?
Like putting a guard in motion at the 1-yard line versus Ohio State. That's too cute.
It's not the game to be doing that in. Those are the two things for me is, can there be a maturation for a younger offensive coordinator who hasn't been in these big game situations very often against big Big Ten teams? And can your young quarterback, who's now the veteran leader of the group and who is no longer has those excuses of being the young guy, he has to step up to the plate. Does he play to his potential that he has been given for multiple years now? Those are huge question marks that are going to completely swing this.
All right. I got to push back on you on this. You talk about taking the next step, which I agree. He's got to take a next step for them to be in a national title game. He has to. Where I push back is that I just don't think it's fair for me to say that he could not have a weapon get open in multiple playoff games and me put that all on him. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Joe, the interception the freshman, the guy that picked the ball off,
Christian
Gray. Joe, I mean, the receivers can get zero separation. What do I expect him? How do I expect him to make the big throw when they're playing different?
Just don't throw it. Don't throw it. They couldn't stop him with his legs. He should have. He could have. I don't remember the play to exact.
Remember, it was an in cut. Not Harrison Wallace. Tyler Warren was on an in cut or whoever it was, and it got picked. I mean, the kid read the route. They couldn't get the point that I'm trying to make here is, Joe, they could get no separation against any team. So I don't want to put it all on him. It's look, The only thing that you went in the portal for, basically, was what? Receiver. Because you know that you weren't good enough there. Now, can this Ross kid get in the slot and make some things happen because you're not going to press him like that? Yes. It's going to be interesting to see how Kotelnicki does. But I will concede this notion. If Drew Allar has receivers getting open and getting separation finally, and he still is having those issues, fine. But until then, I'm still holding back on him because I just don't think that he has any weapons. Like not somebody that can separate enough. Now, we talk about sometimes in the NFL that a good quarterback can make a receiver. Don't act like that's normally tagged for like Tom Brady. You can't do that to that kid. You can't put him in that realm of that. They got to show me that they can separate a receiver, Joe. I'm sorry. I think this kid's got talent, serious talent. If he doesn't get that, then they could be in. Then they're going to be a lot like they were a year ago.
I think that we can separate this conversation, Blake, of Drew Allar's improvement and the lack of separation created by receivers. I think that they're issues that lead to a lot of the same just the general problem. Offensive inconsistency. But I still believe that Drew Allar is not playing up to what his potential could be. He is a guy that is a gifted arm, that is a gifted athlete, that he needs to, outside of the separation, needs to make bigger plays. I'm not trying to put everything on his shoulders here, but I don't think that everything to me on film, watching him this year and watching him in these games, made me think, oh, none of this is his fault.
I'm not trying to say that now.
I know you're not. I feel like that the offense overall leaves a little bit to be desired. And I think that is the whole talking point for Penn State in 2025 of them reaching their potential is if their offense can actually reach that capability that's on the table here with a creative offensive coordinator, a big-time strong-arm quarterback with a big frame who's a good athlete, all of those things. I'd like to bring up their schedule, though, like I did yesterday.
Okay,
Can I read through this?
Yeah.
All right. This is an insane stretch. Listen to how many games that they have before they go on the road. Versus Nevada, versus FIU, versus Villanova, bye week, versus Oregon, at UCLA, versus Northwestern, at Iowa, bye week, at Ohio State, versus Indiana, at Michigan State, versus Nebraska, at Rutgers. So not only do you start your first 5 weeks of the season not having to travel on the road, which is asinine.
You don't go on the road until October.
That's nuts that they're afforded this. They get to host Oregon, who is a far team to travel for, and their only difficult other matchup is Ohio State. They don't have to face USC, Michigan.
You're not
Washington.
Ready to put Indiana in there?
Indiana will be a good matchup, but my point is they don't have to play Michigan, USC, Washington, or Illinois in 2025. I don't see more than 2 losses on here if they completely if they play like ass in those big games. I'd be shocked if they had worse than a 10-2 record.
Well, that means that you're putting them as a top 6 team.
Yes.
All right.
That's my whole point.
In reference to their schedule, Joe, can I get the objective out now? At the end of the year, well, Penn State had a favorable schedule, and they might have lost one of the best two of the games that they played. They can't go 0-2 again against Oregon and Ohio State. It can't happen.
No.
Here's what I'd say: there's a lot less unknowns with Penn State than Oregon, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a young quarterback at Oregon or Ohio State take off. But
I would argue there's also less unknowns at Penn State than there is at Ohio State. There's also way more unknowns at Ohio State. Yeah, go ahead.
Correct. Sorry. That's what I was going to say. No, you're right. I mean, you said exactly where I was going with that. But, bro, listen. James can't walk this one back. I have been defending him and defending him and defending him. This one ain't it. This is it. Like,
it's on a platter. It's on a platter.
Look, I will concede this. I can make the argument that Ohio State only won one real big game in the regular season a year ago.
Yeah.
They went 10-2 and won the national title. I'm not saying it's over for them if they went 10-2 again, because they can win a national title. They could get hot. Look, anything can happen. But man, you got to get this monkey off your back. And now, you want to break confidence and go on a run? Confidence can come in many different ways. I feel like if you lose those 2 games that you have not been winning, it's just like, oh, same old year. And confidence and morale goes down. What I look at and say with James, just win one of them. Joe, they can lose to Oregon for me for all I care. Lose to Ohio State, but beat Oregon. You got to win one of them. Get that monkey off your back. But man, it's an interesting situation in Happy Valley. Joe, I'm going to be real with you. I have not even come close to making my top 25 poll. Not close. I will say this and end it here. I'm having a conversation if I'm putting Penn State 1. I will have that conversation. Right. I mean, they will not make it out of my top 3. They might not make it out of my top 2. That's how confident I could be. But James has got, look, man, no more defending on Ruffino and Joe show if you can't overcome now. Because Joe, you know it's true. I've been defending his ass. I have been. Because I think that he's done enough for what he can do. But now's the time to strike now. Now's the time for you to hit.
That is like the final piece about all this. Is if all of that comes into play, is the preparation there for Oregon and Ohio State. And also, I'd throw Indiana in there, but they're probably going to beat Indiana. You got to at least win one of those. Like, I'll give them a pass losing to Ohio State on the road, but you got to beat Oregon at home traveling cross country.
Or even if you
that is a must win.
To Oregon, you got to beat Ohio State and then vindicate yourself.
You can't. That's my part. Their floor is 10-2, but they better go 11-1. Like they better go 11-1. They can't dick around here. They have a high floor, but their ceiling's obviously going 12-0 because you do have this advantage of hosting Oregon and going and traveling to Ohio State in a year removed from a national championship with a new quarterback and a whole new circumstance, a new defensive coordinator. You have their defensive coordinator, a new offensive coordinator, all of those variables that are going against Ohio State. They have been handed, after all the years of suffering of having to deal with Michigan and Ohio State in the ways that they did, they have been handed a 12-0 capability. Can they actually take advantage of it is the question.
Well, look, some of these lower-end teams, some of these middle-pack teams, they don't have to play. Like, I think Michigan's an 8-4, 9-3 team. I think they're tough as shit. So, yeah. I mean, even, brother, you going to Rutgers? Pennsylvania and Jersey ain't that far. How far are you from Pennsylvania?
Penn State's like a 2.5 hour drive. Yeah, that's nothing. It's nothing.
And you know that they're going to fly, which makes it like a 35-minute flight.
Yes, which is even stupider, but yes, that's true.
All right. We're out of here. Until what day is this? Oh, until Wednesday. Oh, shit, my brain. All right.
Get some sleep.
I know. Until Wednesday, we'll see y'all soon. You have a good night. Peace.